right, so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this event. And so I'll be focusing on the role that multi-development banks and international financial institutions can play to support the development of long-term strategies and also their use in national development plans and financing strategies. So if we look at the first steps that lead to the development of a long-term strategy, we can see that usually it's a multi-stakeholder consultation process that involves many actors from different sectors across the economy in the country, and that involves the modeling of the emission reductions required per sector in the long term, also the analysis of the vulnerabilities of countries to climate change, and from a financial perspective, the analysis of the barriers to investment in the country. And so that process usually results in a country long-term vision that includes the priority actions in terms of sectors and technologies that need to be prioritized for climate action. Also, the different targets that need to be set for each sector in terms of mitigation, but also in terms of adaptation policies, and also the government interventions that are needed in the country. So based on that, the countries then have to implement the strategy and come up with the...
We're still at the first slides. I don't know if you meant to be moving, but...
sorry. Oh, okay.
Voilà. Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, so then I'll just... I was in full screen, but it doesn't seem to work. That's fine. So yeah, on this slide, I hope you're able to see all the different steps in the process. So then we need to get to a long-term financing plan that helps us implement the long-term strategy in the country. And that usually is based on the feasibility studies that are performed following the development of the long-term strategy, with the cost and benefit analysis of the different policies and interventions that are needed. There's also financing strategies and budgetary measures that are defined. And also the national development plans and the sectoral development bank plans are supposed to be based on the long-term strategy. So that also echoes the previous presentations that we had today. And as you can see in the second box, well, the third box actually from the left, this involves an intermediary step that requires the identification of the investment priorities in the country and their costing. Also the identification of the financing options, both from the public sector and the private sector. And also other complementary policies that are needed to support investment in the country. So if we sum up here just in terms of the areas where multilateral development banks and international financial institutions can play a role. So there is the upstream process on the left, where in this complex process, there might be needs for financial and technical support to perform these analyses that are required. And also in terms of the intermediary step that you can see for the identification of the investment priorities and the financing options, that's also a step which requires direct support, both financial and technical again, for the countries to come up with the long-term financing plans for their LTSs. And then in the last box that you can see on the right at the bottom, so once we have long-term strategies and their financing plans, which again, as highlighted by other presenters, have to be closely related, there is other activities that are directly supported by MDBs and bilateral donors as well, and other international financial institutions. that support the implementation of these long-term strategies. So, for example, we now see that policy-based loans might be an option as well that can increase the alignment of multilateral development banks operations in countries. That can also lead to domestic financial system reforms that are needed to unlock financing opportunities in the country from both the public and the private sector mainly. So all these activities are also a direct way in which multilateral development banks can support long-term strategy implementation. And so if we come up with 3 main areas where they can support, there is the upstream process to come up with the long-term strategy vision that is needed in the country to transform it in the longer term and direct its shorter term actions for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Then there is the second step, which is the intermediary step, which will be key to develop the financing strategies with the identification of the public and private financing options in the country and the identification of the needed transformations that need to happen. And lastly, the last area of support is in the implementation in the ground of the long-term strategy through not just projects, but also other activities that aim to support the financial system in the country and the economic system towards the transition. Maybe conscious of time, I'll just finish here, and I'd like